Hey guys, so we are in almost the middle of October, and you may remember we sort of got up to this letter that Vincent sent to Theo, basically describing this dude, right? Just describing how kind of shocked he was at this leering self-portrait that Gauguin sent him. And so I don't know if you guys remember that Gauguin sent that one with Bernard in the background. Bernard sent that one with Gauguin in the background. This one's kind of a lot more amateurish, I think you can see. But the thing we spoke about in the last episode was this part here, where he said, with two exclamation marks, while Gauguin looks ill and tormented in his portrait. Now, the part that I think is going to surprise a lot of you, and I'm giving you a little bit of a spoiler here, when Gauguin arrives, now Gauguin's been saying, I'm feeling ill, I don't feel well. When Gauguin actually arrives in Arles, which is basically about barely a week from now in terms of the letters, Van Gogh is going to be like, wow, you actually seem healthier than I do, right? And that's already a clue to what is the reason why his health is declining. What is the reason that things are starting to unravel? By the way, I just want to once again just express our support for Snow Lion. I know you're going through a difficult time, but we are aware of it and we are holding thumbs for you. Welcome to Karina, Mel, Lynn, Sharon, Chelsea, Amy. Good to see you guys. Plant Lady. I think Plant Lady is someone new. Okay, so I don't want to spend too much time just kind of waffling. I want to try and get through the next couple of letters. We're going to go to I think it's is it the 8th? The 8th of October. And again, we want to try and figure out what is the reason why he starts losing his health. What is the reason why things start unraveling? And it's not really what you might think. It's not actually Gauguin's fault. You could substitute any other person, Theo coming to visit him, his sister coming to visit him. I don't know. You can, I guess, put quite a few Bernard coming to visit him. It's not really that person's fault for coming to visit him. It's the way that he's dealing with it. And I was thinking about that in a sort of a direct sense, right? When I left South Africa to do my trip through America, just to give a like a contemporary example, my YouTube channel was really kind of on fire. It was really doing really, really well. And so I really had that temptation to go to America and then to kind of continue um, to kind of continue working while I was in America. In other words, like to keep that ball rolling. And so let me put that in perspective. It's like you go to New York, you do whatever, and then at night when I guess you should be sleeping, or during your downtime phase, you sort of do 2 or 3 hours work. You sort of you do some research, you put up a video, and then you get maybe 4 hours sleep, and then the next day you do that again. You end up with 4 hours sleep, and again and again. Where do you think that's going to take you? And one of the reasons why that didn't happen was because I struggled in two departments. The one was being able to find the right cable for my and charger for my laptop, and the other thing was there's a little bit of difficulty getting my phone set up, and both of those things probably set me back 2 or 3 days. But if those setbacks didn't happen, I may have arrived in America, and as I say, just try to keep that ball rolling. But what do you think would have ultimately happened if that had happened? Right, and you might say it's greed, or you might say it's something like that. It's actually work ethic. You trying to keep going with the thing that you've been doing while something else is on your what do you call it? Like on your not on your desk, on your what do they call it? You've got so much on your it's not a tray. How do they say it? You've got so much on your, just can't think of the word. Plate, that's it, yeah. And so, fortunately, I didn't continue with that, but you can imagine if I had, where things would have ended up. And so at some point I had to make a decision, okay, I'm going to let all the momentum that my channel built up fizzle. All the work that I worked so hard to build up, I'm going to let it sort of fizzle away, and I'm going to do something else, kind of thing. Okay, and so if you think about Van Gogh and the Yellow House, him decorating the Yellow House, like you tend to think, oh, so he while he was buying furniture, while he was painting the house, while he was getting the house cleaned, he obviously wasn't painting, was he? What do you think the answer is to that? Let me say that again. During this effort to prepare the Yellow House, do you think that he just didn't really paint? He kind of, what's the word? He dedicated his time and effort to that, and then when he was done with that, then he got back to painting. What do you think the answer is? Oh, thanks a lot. Yeah, this is the first shirt that I bought basically in Montana. I think I bought a New York cap before that, but it was one of the first things that I bought. I think in my very first live in America, well, in Montana, I think I was wearing this shirt. I think so. Yeah, so that's right. He was actually still painting. And we know this because he asked his brother to send, he needs money, and he needs money for canvases and colors and all that kind of thing. So he isn't, in terms of his efforts, he doesn't sort of paint, then set up the Yellow House, and then go back to painting. He's painting constantly, and then the Yellow House is like an added amount of effort on top of that. And can you see how that is going to weigh someone down to some extent? That is going to, it's going to lead to a certain amount of stress above and beyond the normal levels. It's almost like the submersible. It's you're pushing it further and harder. In this case, you're pushing this painter, and he's now being worn a little thin, right? Do you see what I'm saying? Thanks a lot, Robbie Robin. And so this whole idea that, so let me just take it a step back just before we get into the letter. If you didn't know anything about the story, like, so you guys just like pretend that you're wiping your slate completely clean. So you say, I don't know anything about the Van Gogh letters. I don't know anything about Van Gogh. I didn't read the book. I don't know anything. And somebody said to you, why do you think Van Gogh cut off his ear? Right? Then wouldn't the first thing that you'd think is that he was sort of mentally unstable or something, that he, and then wouldn't you say, well, where did that mental instability come from? Right? Thanks a lot, Sharon. Wow, you guys are quick off the mark. Where does that mental instability come from? Then you say, this is if you didn't know the story. Wouldn't you say, isn't it because he's not selling his art? In other words, you didn't even know Gauguin was part of the whole deal. So the the sort of very simplistic thing is, in December 1888, Van Gogh lost his ear. We're assuming he cut it off. That's not really even a question. Why did he cut off his ear? What do you think most people would say? Would most people say, well, because he was a very troubled artist, he couldn't sell any of his art. And then you say, wasn't he mad? Okay, so he was mad. Well, why was he mad? Well, wasn't he mad because he couldn't sell his art? So it's kind of like he was mad because he couldn't sell his art. He couldn't sell his art, and so he was mad. That's kind of the cyclical thinking. And then a lot of people just wouldn't necessarily think it further than that. And that is why I chose the title for this video, where he says 1,000 times, no, that is not really the issue, which is very counterintuitive, because you would have thought, surely if he's painting all the time, the thing that he would want is for his art to be sold. So how on earth can that not be bothering him? So what is he doing? What is he trying to do if he's painting, painting, painting? And it is quite a difficult and complicated question, but maybe, thanks a lot, Karina. But maybe it's kind of got to do with, he wants to reach the point where he feels his art is good enough. And I think in a way, rightfully, he can basically take the position, you need to still do a bit of work, especially if you compare his art to Gauguin, right? Just to name one other artist. In other words, although he's working really hard, he doesn't expect to sell his art because he just doesn't feel like he's ready. Does that make sense? Yeah, so at the moment, you 100% is feeling renewed and refreshed, but you're going to see as well that things aren't that great either, right? He's up until this point now, he has been feeling inspired, invigorated, energized, all those things. Now that tide is starting to turn. And I must tell you that in preparing this episode, I kind of just thought I'm going to go ahead a little bit in time, and I'm just going to put together a couple of different titles for the next 4 episodes. And before I knew it, I was in December 23rd. And what that tells you is, we're going to go through, in this episode, we're going to go through 4 or 5 or 6 epic long letters, right? And as soon as we're through that, then the letters start to become fewer and further between, and the letters become a lot shorter. So whatever is starting to take hold is starting to take hold of him now. And that's why we've really got to pay attention to what he says, right? And so let's do that. But just bear in mind what I said earlier, that if I went to America and I just continued making YouTube videos while doing all the other things that I was doing, that would be ultimately very stressful. In other words, if you insisted on doing both, whether you insisted on doing the YouTube videos and, okay, I'm going to go and hire a car and I'm going to drive all day and I'm going to do this, and then at the end of the day, I'm going to make another video. Or you say, I'm going to drive all day, I'm going to look at this, and I've got to go and see that, and then you're exhausted, but I am going to make another video, right? And you did that day after day. Where do you think it would eventually get you, right? Thanks so much, Stephanie. I appreciate it. So just a last comment before we get into this letter of 8th October. It's quite interesting that it was unfinished and not sent. Is tonight is the coldest day in South Africa. Right now, it's 1 degree Celsius, so it's about freezing. But I mean, if I wanted to go and celebrate the cold weather, I mean, it is snowing in certain places, I'd have to drive a really long way just to get to snow. It's not like it's really cold and, oh, great, it's snowing. It doesn't really snow. In fact, even where it is snowing, in some of the photos people have sent, you've got to like strain your eyes to actually see the snow. That's a big difference between my country and yours. We get really cold weather, and then it's but very briefly, and then it's gone. And basically, after this cold snap, it'll get warmer and warmer and warmer, and then summer will be there. But I mean, we don't really have snow that lies around for any length of time. Where is your what? Not sure what that is. What's TOQUE? Okay, so let's continue. So this is letter 546 from All, 8th of October 1888. My dear Theo, thanks for your letter, but I've had a very thin time of it these days. Now, do you remember the last couple of letters I emphasized him saying, I'm so happy, things are so beautiful, blah, 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 right? All of that. Amy says, I'd love to be in your cold weather. I'm a winter person. I don't think I'm a winter person. I don't think I could make Canada. I don't think I could have 6 months of winter. Anyway, he says, my money ran out on Thursday, so it was a damnably long time till Monday noon. And so there it is. These 4 days, I've lived mainly on 23 cups of coffee with bread, which I still have to pay for. So can you see in those two lines, he's basically telling you just how much he's wearing himself out, how much he's stretching himself out. He's turning himself inside out to get this house ready for a possible visitor, right? And it would be hard enough just doing that, but he's also painting, and at the same time he's not eating. Imagine that. Imagine for 4 days all you have is a couple of cups of coffee and bread, and you haven't even been able to pay for the bread. So guess what he's doing with the money? He's spending all of his money on furniture and painting, and he's not even eating with it, right? That's why I say it's a work ethic. It's not about greed, it's work ethic. He's trying very, very hard to get the studio that he's invested so much of himself personally into off the ground, right? That's kind of what is his focus, but it's starting to actually exhaust him. Can you see he's actually heading for kind of exhaustion? And remember, he said at some point that I can't paint when there's something wrong with my stomach. Well, do you think you can have a good stomach scenario drinking 23 cups of coffee and a little bit of bread over 4 days? So can you see how this is starting to address the question of how is Van Gogh starting to unravel? Is it because he's going mad? No. Although I suppose you could say if you're so working so obsessively, you could maybe say it's a kind of madness. I wouldn't say that. Just that he's so hell-bent on getting to the position that he wants to be in terms of the studio, getting the studio off the ground, that he's starting to kind of wear himself thin. And now think about that in the context of by the time Gauguin arrives, Vincent's actually kind of ill in the sense that he's exhausted, he's worn out, and now some other dude arrives there and he's kind of fine. And he wants to do X, Y, and Z. Meanwhile, Van Gogh is kind of actually, in a way, ill. He's sort of totally overworked, right? And now this other artist arrives there, and he's sort of supposed to. In other words, by the time Gauguin arrives in all, Vincent is sort of broken down, not in the sense that he's got a nervous breakdown, but his immunity is broken down. His health is just in a poor condition. And can you imagine if you've done all of this work for this person, and this person is quite sort of has airs and graces and is quite ungrateful, and that person starts arguing with you or demanding things, and you just like totally exhausted, and now you're going to run errands for them. Can you imagine that? Can you understand how that can lead to an argument or just a difficult situation, right? Yeah, and that's also true. That's also true. Okay, so he says to Theo, it's not your fault, it's mine if it's anyone's. And that's also very important to bear in mind. It is his fault. So, what is the solution here? And I guess the solution is don't try so hard, don't work so hard, don't um, put in so much effort. But that's the kind of person Van Gogh is, isn't it? Intense dude, right? And this is kind of a very important moment in his life. He says, because I was wild to see my pictures in frames and I'd ordered too many for my budget, seeing that the month's rent and the charwoman also had to be paid. And even today is going to drain me dry because I must also buy some canvas and prepared myself as Tassades has not yet come. So essentially what he's really talking about here is got kind of money troubles. As much as Theo's been sending him money, he's been using it up, not for food, not for brothels, not for chocolates and expensive meals. Basically, just all of that money has gone into preparing the studio and him also continuing to paint, right? And so he's just kind of exhausting himself on his own inspiration, if that's the word. He must have been edgy as well. Grandson, you're 100% right. Zircon says, I like that he takes responsibility. So he says, would you ask him as soon as possible if he has sent it off 10 meters or at least 5 of ordinary canvas? But I should not mind, my dear boy, if I did not feel that you yourself must suffer from the pressure that this work puts on us now. So again, there is a simple explanation for what's going on. He's under a lot of pressure, right? He's put himself under this pressure, and he's suffering because of it. But I venture to think that if you saw the studies, you would say, I was right to work at white heat as long as it was fine. Now, what do you think he means by that? What do you think he means by that comment? I was right to work at white heat. I interpret that as to work like at maximum, that he's working basically himself to the bone. Isn't that how you see that? It wasn't so the last few days. There's a merciless mistral fiercely sweeping along the dead leaves. And I must say, just that description, just those words kind of give you a sense, an atmospheric sense of what's going on in his heart at this point. In the same way that the mistral is like this, the skeletal, like skeletal fingers raking the leaves. That is kind of like what's going on inside Van Gogh. It's like he's becoming threadbare just with how hard he's working, right? And they're like just like dry leaves where there should be food in his stomach. It's almost like just dry leaves, and he's actually mercilessly pushing himself, right? He says, but between now and the winter, there will be another spell of magnificent weather and magnificent effects. And then the thing will be to make another headlong spurt, right? And so he's talking about this idea of at certain times, you've got to get up, pick yourself up by your bootstraps and work like hell. And that is what he's anticipating after this spurt, if you want to call it that. There's going to be another spurt, right? Okay. I am so much taken up with the work that I cannot come to a dead stop. There he says it in his own words. And so let me again ask you, um, is this because he's mad? Is this thing that's happening to him? Is it because he's got some kind of mental illness? Is this thing that's happening to him because he has syphilis? Why is this happening? Or like, what exactly are we talking about? Basically, we're talking about a workaholic. We're talking about someone who can be very committed to what he's doing, and so he works really, really hard. And you kind of get the feeling, like I said earlier, he's working really, really hard until he reaches almost like this imaginary point where he'll feel like, I've reached a certain level and now I can kind of not relax, but I don't have to work that hard then, because my work has reached that level, and things that needed to be at a certain point are now where they need to be. Do you know what I mean? And if you think about just the way the mainstream view Van Gogh, it's like, no, 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 he was a mad artist. He was mad because he couldn't sell his work. He was a very troubled artist. No, he's a hard-working artist. And the part that made his life a little bit difficult was that he often didn't have money. And that didn't make him mad. That just made him, he was in a place of struggle, right? And the other thing to bear in mind is we're dealing with someone who's willing to, we've said this before, put himself second, is willing to sacrifice, right? Is willing to work really, really hard. In this case, kind of for Gauguin. Gauguin is about to arrive at the Yellow House and he's doing a lot of work kind of on Gauguin's behalf, right? And so you get this idea that this guy is prepared to self-sacrifice. And so when there's a disaster and like a Gabby Petito type incident, like the Moab stop, why doesn't he just say, this person did that to me? Why not just do that? Because he's worked so hard to get the show to where it is. He doesn't want his brother to say, you know what, I've had enough of this nonsense. You're a problem, or you in danger, or this is not a good situation. Why don't you just come back to Paris and we'll figure something out? He's on his own van life adventure, but he's also working really hard to make it happen. Just like Gabby Petito was working really hard on her blog and trying to get her thing going as well. But how does the person feel that's with her, right? That's right. What did you see twice so far that's so good? Oh, Loving Vincent. Okay. Well, cried all the way through it. Okay. Okay, let's go back to this letter. If you haven't seen Loving Vincent, if you're watching this, please do watch it ASAP. Then he says, I cannot come to a dead stop. I can't stop working. Don't worry, the bad weather will make me stop only too soon, like today, yesterday, and the day before yesterday, too. So he's also anticipating all of this is going to come to a natural, it's going to be slowed down naturally because of bad weather. So I'm going to kind of work as hard as I can until the weather sort of interferes with that. And I must say, I've done it many times. Fortunately, it didn't happen with my trip to America, but it's happened many times where I work right up until the moment I leave, like on my flight. And by the time because I know I'm going on a holiday, because I know that there's going to be a period of not working, I work maybe twice as hard in the run up to that, to the extent that you almost get sick and you almost get run down just before you leave. And for various reasons, I didn't do that prior to my trip to America. One of them was I was arguing with some people here. We were sawing down trees, and what else were they doing? And so that was that distracted me a little bit from my work. maybe fortunately. Deborah says, loving Vincent really tugged at my heartstrings. Okay. Anyway, so he says, do your utmost to persuade Thomas. He's bound to do something. Do you know what I've left today for the week, and that after 4 days of strict fasting? So can you see he describes the last 4 days as basically not eating anything. He's working so hard that he's basically not even eating. He's so hard up in terms of he's getting a lot of money, but he's spending it all on paints and canvas and furniture and bedding, I guess, that he's not actually eating. That's how hard he is pushing himself. It's not on Netflix. It's not on Netflix. Okay. He says, just 6 francs. It is Monday, the very day I received your letter. I ate something at noon, but already this evening I shall have to sup on a crust of bread. And the money is spent on nothing but the house or else the pictures. There you have it in like black and white. I'm not eating. And it's almost like he suddenly realizes at a certain point, Jeepers, I'm starving. I'm falling apart. Can you just send me 6 francs? Can you just send me whatever it is? And then I will, like I've kind of realized that I'm pushing really too hard. I just need to eat something. Then he changes sort of the subject. He says, this is great news about Bog. If these good gentlemen can make use of the mauves as a set-off for Corot, it may come off and it may be a true and even a just thing. Because really the mauves, mestachs or marises have a heavy effect beside Corot. It is nonetheless true that they have bought a lot of it, even Mauve's last watercolors. It was they who took them to be framed at that place where we saw them, the man who made the frames for Reed's Monticelli's. I'm almost sure that Barg will like my big studies, the Starry Night, Furrows, etc. He will like some in the last batch much less. So far, Barg is in sympathy with me because he likes painting to be rich and in full impasto. I've heard him on it often enough in the past. I do not count at all on their buying, only it would do no harm to tell Barg that I have some big studies here. So again, he says, I do not count at all on their buying. So he's painting and he is hoping that someone will buy his things. Hi, Bria. Good to see you. I hope things have settled down in France, have they? I was definitely thinking about you while things were happening. So even here he says, I don't count at all on their buying, but he is to some extent hopeful and he is optimistic. I have some big studies here of autumn effects and keep him going with that. I should say you might show him the Thomas, show him and Thomas the White Orchard. I don't think that's terribly good. But not much else. We must not push the studies which are more trouble to do but are less pleasing to the eye than the pictures, which are the result and fruit of them, and which one paints as in a dream without so much agony. And so there's also a little bit of an indication why he may be kind of on a roll, because he's kind of feeling that is kind of achieving a breakthrough in his art, is achieving almost like that state of flow. And if you apply that to training, I've had that when I've trained to be a triathlete. You train and you train and you train, and then you start feeling yourself flying. You start feeling yourself, suddenly you reach another level and you're just faster and lighter, and you kind of get addicted to that feeling of agency, right? Of like sheer physical power that you've suddenly achieved. And then you want to see if you can take it to the next level. And then it's so difficult not to overtrain, because at some point you've got to rest. At some point you've got to ease down. At some point you've got to rest. But when you are starting to see results, it's quite hard to do that, right? Does that make sense? He says, I have had walnut frames made for the two pictures of Poet's Garden, and they have a very good effect. And now I'm looking for a frame in yellowish chestnut. By the way, right now I'm looking to not really frame, but mount two prints I've got of Zion National Park. So that's kind of like what I'm doing while he's talking about this. I think I might be able to show it to you next Sunday. He says it is as stiff and plain as the rim of a slate, but the tone of the wood does well. Pine also goes well with the furrows and the vineyard, right? If you were very kind and would send me a louis by return mail, I could get through the week and be spared the pinching which accompanied the beginning of this month. Without it, I should get too run down, right? So can you see, as much as this is what is happening to him, he is at least aware of it. He is at least aware that this is what he's doing to himself. And we are now, where are we? Is it the 8th of October? On the 8th of October, he's aware that he's run down. And so the question is he going to get more rundown or less rundown? Is he going to recover from this? But this is where he is. So our question is, how does he end up losing his ear in December? This is the beginning of that process. He starts to become run down physically, and I guess to some extent emotionally, in the middle of October. If he wasn't run down, in other words, if he was rested when Gauguin arrived, would that have made a difference? Would he have been able to stand up to Gauguin? Would it possibly have been even worse if he had, so that's something else to consider. I should not have all my strength for the fine days, which I hope we shall have at the end of the week after the Mistral. So can you see he is aware that his strength is starting to, like when you play a computer game, the strength bar kind of gets chewed away. It kind of just starts to dissipate. He's aware that that's happening. He says, I should not have all my strength. If he doesn't have that money, he's not going to have all of his strength. And obviously the money is for food. Yeah, with another portrait that I wrote about another letter that I wrote about Gauguin's portrait during the last few days. Now, the other thing that's so fascinating to think about in terms of this letter is he doesn't actually send it. It says here, unfinished, not sent. And if you think about it, what is this letter all about? It's kind of admitting weakness. It's where he says several times, I'm a little bit desperate. This is how I've been living. It's not your fault, but I'm struggling and I'm not eating, and I really, it's quite a desperate letter, and he ends up not sending it. And why do you think that is? Why do you think he doesn't even send the letter? I mean, he's in a desperate place. Why do you think he doesn't send the letter? I think one possibility is maybe money arrived shortly. The other thing might be he might think he's going to spook his brother. His brother's going to say, I don't know whether we should be sending Gauguin to you if you are so falling apart. I mean, how are you going to be able to look after Gauguin if you can't look after yourself? So I kind of get the feeling it's a very authentic letter from him, but I kind of get the feeling when he read it back, he thought, I can't send this letter to my brother. What's he going to think? And what if he sends this letter to Gauguin? I don't want to fuck up basically everything that I've worked for. I'm trying to get the studio set up. My brother's going to realize that I'm not actually up to doing it. I'm too weak, right? I've got to just keep keep going, right? Don't you kind of get that sense? So Yeri says, the chief thing is that I underline this, that I do not like these atrocious hardships of the craft, except insofar as they show us the way. Our way is neither to endure them ourselves nor to make others endure them, but the opposite. I do not think I exaggerate about Gauguin's portrait, nor about Gauguin himself. He must eat and go for walks with me in lovely surroundings, pick up a nice girl now and then, see the house as it is and as we shall make it, and altogether enjoy himself. Again, can you see what a self-sacrificing guy he is? He kind of says Gauguin must arrive and eat and go for walks with Van Gogh in lovely surroundings. I kind of get the idea that he means Gauguin must pick up a nice girl now and then. I won't. Gauguin will just like meet a nice girl, whatever. Gauguin must see the house as it is, and altogether enjoy himself. Not we must enjoy ourselves. He must eat. He must pick up a nice girl. He must enjoy himself. So it's all about Gauguin having this great artistic adventure, kind of at Van Gogh's expense, right? Van Gogh is kind of going to make it happen for him, and he's going to be like his butler and his doorman. Don't you kind of get that idea? Um, Jazzy says, I swear you're a great philosopher of our time. Interesting. Stephanie says, thanks a lot. Maybe he wouldn't have lost his ear if his brother did encourage him to have space. Okay. So he goes on to say, he has lived cheaply, yes, but he has got so ill by doing it that he can that he can see no difference between a gay color and a dismal one. Can you see the irony here? He says he has got so ill by living cheaply. That's exactly what's happened to Van Gogh, except worse. Like I say, when Gauguin arrives, like Van Gogh's impression of Gauguin is that Gauguin is ill, that Gauguin, you know, is literally sick. And then when Gauguin arrives, Van Gogh kind of gets a shock. He's like, "Wow, you in better shape than what I am." And why is that? Because Van Gogh has been working himself to the bone far more than Gauguin, right? It is high time that he came. No fear that he will recover very soon. Meantime, forgive me if I exceed my allowance. I shall work all the more, I promise you. So this is another reason why perhaps he didn't send the letter, because he's admitting he's exceeded his allowance. Maybe just thought, look, I'll I'll just have one more day of coffee and bread, and then maybe things will sort of sort themselves out. But here he says, but I have an absolute horror of this melancholy a la Meyron. Um, you will see the two portraits of Gauguin and Bernard someday and compare them with the negresses, and you will see that he absolutely must cheer up, or else, but none of that or else, we'll take it for granted that he is going to cheer up. But it's quite interesting, the or else, because the or else literally did happen. You know, Gauguin came to all, tried to make it work, couldn't make it work, couldn't cheer up, couldn't be optimistic, and then all else happened. He says, it is indeed high time. I write in haste, I'm working on a portrait. So that's the other thing, he's not eating, he's not um, is spending his money on furniture. Even when he's writing this letter, he's writing and painting. You kind of get the idea that he's painting a portrait, and then he takes a break and he writes a few lines of the letter when a few thoughts occur to him. Maybe he cleans a paintbrush or something like that, writes a few lines of the letter, and then goes back to his portrait. That is to say, I'm doing a portrait of mother for myself. one wonders why he's doing that. Is he doing that to soothe himself? Why is he painting his mother at this point? I cannot stand the colorless photograph, and I'm trying to do one in a harmony of color as I see her in my memory. So I don't know if you remember, quite a few letters ago, Theo sent him a photo of his mother, and he was kind of triggered by shit. Look how photography is intruding on our work, on portraiture. And so that's another thing that he's obsessing about, that he can't let go of. I've got to try and do something that can compete with this photographic portrait. Yeah, definitely multitasking. Um, he says, I'm trying to do one in harmony of color as I see you in memory. A good handshake, ever yours, Vincent. Do not delay. If it does not leave you too short, do not delay sending me the Louis and canvas. You kind of get the sense that he's quite desperate here, right? Like you don't get this sense of desperation in many of his letters. Like he really seems beat down in this particular letter. He says, again, I've been so hard up since Thursday that from Thursday to Monday, I've only had 2 meals, right? Apart from those, I had only bread and coffee, and even that I had to drink on credit and had to pay for today. So if you can, do not delay a minute. And I think when he gets to this point, something happens. Either the mailman arrives with something, or he realizes, I just can't send this letter, because that's how he starts the letter. He says, these 4 days I've lived on 23 cups of coffee. Right at the end, he says just how much he's been struggling. And he seems to realize, I just can't, it's true, but it's going to shock Theo too much if I send him this letter. And so instead, he seems to write a completely different letter. So that's how hard he's pushing himself. He writes this letter, doesn't send it, and then writes another letter. And this is it. My dear Theo, um, my whole mind, like yours, is set on Gauguin now. And like you, I hope that he will come right away. So can you see he's just left out the bit about the 23 cups of coffee? He's just kind of excised it from his letter. He says, this is great about Bach. He's trying to seem enthusiastic. Now that it amazes, not that it amazes me, but I'm pleased for Bach, for I always thought him the penitent thief. So if you happen to see him, and if you don't, then go on purpose. Let him know that I have a starry night, the furrows, the poet's garden, the vineyard. Now just think about what we're talking about. We're talking about someone who's literally a starving artist, like is literally not eating because he's working so hard. And he doesn't expect his art to sell, but he is trying to create opportunities to sell it, right? But just think about how crushing that must feel. You paint a painting, you send it off, it doesn't sell. You paint a painting, that's what you're doing every single day. Paint a painting, send it off, it doesn't sell. You paint a painting, and imagine if it does sell. Imagine if somebody says, oh, I got 100 francs for your picture, or 200 francs. Well, then suddenly you've got some money for food. Suddenly you can have a bottle of wine. Suddenly you can have a sandwich, whatever it is, right? And this is just another scheme where he says, can you let him know that I've got this painting and that one and that one? And he's trying to, he does want to see if his art's going to sell. But in another way, it's just working, thinking, you know what? Eventually, the entropy will give in. Eventually, just through force of will, I've got to, reach that point that I'm destined for, whatever. Okay, so let's continue. In short, romantic landscapes, do not say too much about the studies, which certainly are more trouble to do but are less saleable. If you had sent me 200 francs, I should have done the same thing with the sea at Ste Marie. So here he talks quite a big game. talks about 200 francs, although here he talks about 6 francs again. While we are now in the midst of a merciless mistral, it is very bad for the work, but later, before the real winter, we shall have more fine weather, and in any case, I hope to add the other things to the series I'm working on. Do you know what I've left today out of the money you sent this very day? Well, I have 6 francs. So you can see he's just edited his own letter and try to break the news in kind of a bit more of a gentle way, so as to not panic Theo, right? I asked you to send it to me on Friday, and I only received your letter 4 days later on Monday noon. It is mostly the fault of the frames, which I already ordered and which I need very badly. I can only finish in a frame. And besides, we may make use of them in Marseille. I have 3 kinds of wood, a walnut, chestnut, and pine for the frames. And if you see him, do give Bog my kind regards. And can you see how he's trying to stay polite and upbeat, even though he's in a very, very precarious position? He's kind of, to repeat what I put in another video, he's trying to put lipstick on a pig. The pig being just the horrible position he's in terms of his health. He's trying to seem upbeat. He's trying to sell the glasses half full, even though he's feeling really, really run down. Can you see that? I mean, what we're doing is juxtaposing one letter with another, and you can see how hard he's trying to just sound normal, right? So that gives you a sense of him as a martyr and how he can really swallow his pride and just how serious his work ethic actually is, right? He says, and the same to Trip. Didn't they buy a lot from Mauve? Didn't they even buy Mauve's last big watercolors at a good price? I do not know. It is so long since I saw anything of them. But in the past, I never quarreled with either Trip or Bog. Only, while not saying too much about the first 2 batches, tell Bog that I'm very pleased he has bought that study, that I shall be doing studies as long as the autumn is propitious, I guess. What does that mean? Full of opportunity. Yeah, okay.
Propitious.
There it is. Giving or indicating a good chance of success, favorable, auspicious, promising, providential, advantageous.
Propitious.
Okay. And that I want him to come and see them, and when we send them with some Gorgans. As for Thomas, I think it would be the right thing to go and see him. I've just written that all told, I have 6 francs left. So that's the second time he mentions it, right? Well, I have 6 francs. I have 6 francs left. Is that enough for a week? No. So I really beg you to send me a louis, and that by return mail, please. That will give me 16 francs for the week, and then I shall manage to get through. Can you see he's in a very bad way? Even in this rewrite, he feels like I've got to lay down the, I've got to be honest. There he says it's very urgent, but he's trying to stay polite as well. 1,000 thanks, right? Do not delay. I must be ready to work as soon as the fine weather appears. We have an absolutely merciless mistral, but I must hold myself in readiness. The work is done in short intervals, so that everything must be prepared and ready for the attack. Tessa has not sent any canvas. It is very, very urgent. Do please order 10 or at any rate 5 meters from him at once. Again, look at that. It is very, very urgent there. It is very urgent because I already have bought some canvas here so as to be ready for tomorrow or the day after, according to what the weather will be. The thing is that you must take advantage of the intervals in the Mistral and be ready beforehand. So can you see what is going on? He's starting to become, I guess, emotional. He's starting to push himself really, really hard. And this doesn't bode well for the next 2 months. Can you see how he is starting to unravel? So he says, the work holds me in its grip, and I'm sure I shall not lose by it if I can go on like this. What do you think he means? It just means, you know what, if I can just keep working, then hopefully there'll be a positive result. He doesn't know specifically what it is, but he feels like if I keep working, that's going to be good. And then there it is. But they are exhausting too. He's exhausted at this point. Here with yesterday's letter, which I'm sending you, such as it is, from it you will see what I think of Gauguin's portrait. Too dark, too sad. I do not say that I do not like it as it is, but he will change and he must come. Yes, indeed, they spend less than I. Yes, but if I was with 2 others as he is, if he spent a little more, it would be better. Once more, one must not do flesh with Prussian blue, because then it ceases to be flesh, it becomes wood. And there's nothing so urgent for Gauguin, nothing better for him to do than to join me. Can you see how he's really getting really worked up? You can tell that he's getting emotional, he's starting to unravel. Can you see that? However, I venture to think that with regard to coloring, the other Breton pictures will be better than the portrait he has sent me, done after all in haste. And I am far from judging studies such as that. However, you will see for yourself. Say if you can, don't let me be so hard up all the week. That's like the 3rd or 4th or 5th reference to that. If you can, send me another Louis, another reference. I don't quite know how to manage without it. So can you see he's really in this letter and the one prior that is basically rewritten. It's kind of the most desperate we've seen him in weeks, if not months, if not ever. He's really in a bad place, right? He's in a bit of a hole. 9 October. So I kind of get the feeling he didn't get anything the next day. And so he writes another letter because of that. My dear Theo, yesterday I sent you a wire asking you for another 20 francs. I shall have nothing but that for my food all the week, but I have my frames at last and some stretchers. Only don't let the next letter come later than Sunday, for it is a close, very close siege these days. What do you think he means by that? It's a good question. I don't know how much a Louis is, but I think it's like, I don't know, maybe you'd say $10, or I don't think it would be $1, but it's just enough to get by. Whatever, how much does a Starbucks cost? It's probably how much a Louis would be. His feelings are a foreshadowing of what's to come, but it's in the sense that he's overworked, he's sort of exhausted. And if he was doing all of this work and Gauguin never arrived, that would be fine. But when Gauguin arrives, Gauguin wants to party. Gauguin wants to do whatever Gauguin wants to do. And now, and then Vincent can't rest, right? Yeah, that's quite a good point. Reading the letters is like watching Titanic. You know what's to come and you know the ending won't change. Yeah, well said. So he says, um, yeah, that's well said. He's nearing the end of his ability to endure. It's basically, it's just cutting things very, very fine. He's battling at the edge of his endurance, at the edge of his limits. But we will hold out, and I feel quite calm amid all the commotions we are passing through. So, although I don't know if I believe him, but although he says I feel quite calm, um, the fact is physically he is quite exhausted. Even if it's true that he says he feels calm, I don't know how calm you can be when you don't have money to eat. I don't know. Can you hear my dog snoring? Okay, so he goes on to say, at the very moment I was writing these words, I received notice of the arrival of Tassay's canvas. Great. By the way, if you want to follow this letter, here's a link to it. The walnut frames go well with the studies, and I think that the next batch will be decisive, and that as for selling, we are getting very hot. Let's be sensible and not forget that let's not forget for a minute that not only for our own sake, but also for the success of the studio, we must get back the money spent during the unproductive years. And that is also something that is, I think, making all of this worse. It's really aggravating it. Is he feels indebted to Theo. He feels that Theo's given him so much money, he kind of has to repay it in some way, right? And it's a credit to Van Gogh that he's so conscientious, that he takes responsibility. But if anything, he takes too much responsibility, right? We shall, if we keep calm. Besides, it is our due, and we have suffered enough for it. And I think if you don't understand Van Gogh, or if you can't, if you struggling to figure him out, this really explains a lot. Where he's talking about trying to get back all the, like trying to get something, trying to get some result, some reward, some something tangible for all of their work, all of their effort, right? And it's not just like the effort of a day or a week or a month. He's talking about the unproductive years. He's talking about this long siege, this long campaign of trying to get somewhere as an artist. And then he says, we shall get there, right? We shall succeed if we keep calm. Now, think about that when he loses his ear and when he gets shot. Isn't that what he tries to do? He tries to keep calm because he's still thinking about the success of his campaign, isn't he? Isn't that what Gabby was thinking as well? Something horrible has happened. Someone called 911. But you know what? This van life adventure could still succeed if I stay calm. It is our due, and we have suffered enough for it. That is so much, that is telling us so much about how he thinks and how he feels. This is the genuine Vincent van Gogh. This is not the Van Gogh that many people don't know this Van Gogh. We do. Okay. He says, but I beg you to try to make it up with the Bargs. What I mean is, we are getting too old to fight against existing businesses. And the best policy will probably be to go on quietly, accepting the realities of today. It costs a great deal to found another business, and to use the existing ones costs nothing at all. So then, if you see Barg, explained to him that coming to a country quite new to me, I began to do studies right and left and sent you 2 batches of them. But that if there are any pictures among them, there are only 2 or 3 at the most, such as the white orchard and the harvest with a ruin in the background. At the moment, however, I'm able to concentrate. There's a simple sentence. I can concentrate. I can focus on what I'm doing. As for the new things, these are costing us dear, and we must not be too easy going in selling them. They must bring what they are worth. Let's hope that we shall not be too much on the rocks. With patience, it won't be too difficult for us to do as Moab and Mestach did, who were able to wait and force the price up a little and still got sold. Isn't that what he's kind of thinking? He's thinking, if I paint something and it doesn't sell, maybe I must just be patient. Maybe it will eventually sell. And wasn't that ultimately true? I mean, it was true in a decades long, multi decade sense, but it was nevertheless true. What do you think he means by let's hope we won't be too much on the rocks? It kind of means stuck, shipwrecked, not being able to move, not, not sort of not functional, not fluid, right? We are sparing nothing to get a certain richness in color. And I believe that the thought of gaining something as much for the comrades as for ourselves will give us confidence. And even if we have no fixed plan in business, stop snoring. Everything we do will be based on our deep conviction of the injustice which the artists we know are now suffering under. Again, you might say, what does Van Gogh have to do with true crime? Well, he talks about feeling a deep conviction of the injustice that he's experiencing. He talks about the desire to change all this as much as we can. With that conviction, we can work on calmly and with a will, and after all, we have nothing to fear from anyone. I'm working on a portrait of Mother because the black and white photograph annoys me so. What portraits could be made from nature with photography and painting? I always hope that we are still to have a great revolution in portraiture. I'm writing home for Father's portrait also. I do not want to have black photographs, but I do want to have a portrait. That of Mother, a size 8 canvas, will be ashen gray against a green background, the dress carmine. I do not know if it'll be like her, but anyhow, I want to give the impression of a blonde coloring. You will see it one day, and if you like, I will make one for you too. It will again be a very thick impasto. I think that suggests that his mother had blonde hair, doesn't it? Well, my dear Theo, about your next letter, let me have it on Sunday. It will be all right, I venture to think, for we are getting very near selling, and the stuff I'm getting ready now will put us in the way of making some show when the exhibition is on. It will be a year of hard work, but we shall have good times afterwards. And even in the meantime, I'm doing a brothel study from memory for Bernard. Did you see that drawing of mine, which I put in with Bernard's drawings representing the house? It's quite a nice drawing. I quite like that. I really like that. You can get some idea of the color. I have a size 30 canvas after that drawing. I like the drawing more than I like this. With a handshake and many thanks for the canvas. Now for the attack. Once again, I stick to this, that when these decorations that I'm working on are finished, they ought to be worth 10,000. Whether it is easy for me to do or not, that is my fixed and steady aim. We have spent money and we must get it back. So can you see that is his strategy, is basically saying, you know what, I know I've got to work hard now. It's not going to be forever. And I do have a strategy, and the strategy is we've worked really hard and we've got to get our investment back. And one way to do it is invite Gauguin to stay in this house, help Gauguin paint pictures, and then even if Gauguin can sell his art, that's indirectly I'm associated with that. You know, that's kind of what he's thinking about. Okay, so let's go on to the next letter. 10th of October. I think I'm going to need to get a glass of water after this, so I'll just quickly go through it. My dear Theo, thinking these days how all these expenses of painting are weighing on you. See how he starts it off? He is very burdened by finances. One does wonder if you took money out of the equation, if he just had a lot more access to money, would he have been a better artist? And I would almost be inclined to say no, that he was working so hard because he was trying to survive. Because in a way, his survival was at stake, or at least he thought so. Anyway, he says, you cannot imagine how disquieted I am. And I almost made this the title of this video. You cannot imagine how disquieted I am. What does he mean by that? What's disquieted? And you can almost imagine the people who believe that Van Gogh was mad.
Disquiet.
Yari's admitting that, but it's a little bit different. It means agitated, upset, right? Unsettled. He's not mad. He's not suffering from depression. He's just in a bit of an anxious position, and anyone else would be. He says, when things happen to us, like what you told me in your last letter about Bog, we must be getting very near to selling. Or rather, we ought to be getting near to finding some assistance, either from Thomas or some other of the half dealer, half collector type. CM, without helping us in any other way, could buy one study from us once again. I do not know if you have ever read Les Frères Zemgano by the Goncourt brothers, which perhaps roughly sketches their life story. If you know it, you will know that I'm more afraid than I can say, lest the effort to get money exhaust you too much. Can you see the words that he uses? He uses the word exhaust because that is what is happening. If I were not so horribly and continually tormented by this uneasiness, I should say that we were getting on, because my work will get better and my health is much better than in Paris. So Yari is himself acknowledging that he is starting to struggle mentally now as well. Yeah, makes sense. I see more and more that my work goes infinitely better when I'm properly fed and the paints are there and the studio and all that. So what's the inverse of that? I see more and more that my work goes better when I'm properly fed. Well, when he's not eating very well, doesn't he get quite despondent? When he's really at wit's end, meaning he's hungry, basically starving, how easy is it to be positive when that's going on? Okay. Chelsea says, I'm sure Theo didn't mind. He really loved Vincent. He says, but have I set my heart and my work being a success? And this is the title for this video. Right? Isn't it kind of slightly surprising? Like, wouldn't you say, why is he working so hard? Because he's set his heart is counting on the fact that he's going to be successful. He's saying, no, that's not what it's about. is saying, I wish I could manage to make you really understand that when you give money to artists, you are yourself doing an artist's work, and that I only want my pictures to be of such a quality that you will not be too dissatisfied with your work. What he's saying, although it's, I think, him being a bit of a lawyer here, is he says, I only want my pictures to be of such a quality. That's his goal. He sort of feels like, I can't do anything about the people who won't buy my art. So obviously he does want his art to be sold. Who wouldn't, right? He'd be lying to you if he said, I don't care that my art doesn't get sold. But he's so his work ethic is such, and his humility and modesty is such, that just the idea of selling his art is like kind of on the horizon. He's saying, I realize and understand that I need to develop as an artist. I realize and understand that my work needs to improve a lot before people buy it. I understand that I need to grow and develop, and so I'm going to be focusing on that. It's a little bit like saying, it's not my business to know why people aren't buying my art. It's my business to improve. Does that make sense? And again, you get the sense of Van Gogh as a tremendously cerebral character and a very resilient person in a certain way. Of course, part of that resilience is based on the fact that his brother is paying for everything. It's not like he doesn't have any money. His brother is actually paying for food, accommodation, paints, and so on, right? Um, anyway, so he says, that's not all. I should also like you to feel that you are making a profit on the money you invest, and that by doing so, we shall achieve a more complete independence than we should gain in the art trade itself. He's quite good at telling a story that makes his pathetic situation seem quite manageable and normal, and even what's the word? Purposeful, if that makes sense. I mean, how many people can you imagine could write a paragraph like that when they haven't sold anything for months going into years? How many people could make a comment like that, like with their chin up, without it seeming quite hollow and quite ridiculous? I mean, the reality is you've been painting, 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 and you haven't sold anything. Imagine someone in contemporary society like right now, someone who's been writing books for 2 years or 5 years, and they don't sell a single book. But don't worry, you are doing an artist's work, and I only want my books to be of such a quality, blah, 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 blah. You know what I mean? You'd be like, sorry, you are talking, sorry, this is bullshit. You need to get a proper job, right? Can you see that there wouldn't be a problem? It wouldn't be strange if someone had that kind of response, and that is what makes the Van Gogh story so extraordinary. The fact that his brother allows this madness, for the lack of a better word, to continue. Yeah. Oh, sorry. So he says, and what will be done later to reform trade may be just this, that the dealer will join hands with the artist, and the one for what one may call the housekeeping side, to provide the studio, food, paint, etc., the other to create. Alas, we have not got to that with the old trade, which will always follow the old routine, and is no good to anyone alive, nor any profit to the dead either. But there we need not stew about it, because it is not our duty to alter what exists, and beat our heads against a stone wall. And I think what he means by that is just, you know what, you are born during a particular period and you work, and you can only deal with the cards that you dealt with. You've got to kind of work in quiet desperation in a way, and wait for the cards to fall in a different way, or the dominoes to fall in a different way. He's kind of saying that's got nothing to do with me. And I on the one hand, I get what he's saying and I respect what he's saying. On the other hand, I think I would, you know, if I could speak to Van Gogh, I would say, hold on a second, are you 100% sure that there's absolutely nothing more that you can do? And he'd say, Jeepers, do you know how tired I am? I'm working as hard as I can. And I would say, how hard are you working to make yourself explicable to the people right around you? In other words, to dress in a way that the people around you, I'll put it this way, the way you are dressed puts people off, the way that you don't take baths or whatever. Maybe you could spend a bit more time learning manners and ingratiating yourself with the society. And in other words, being a bit more like Gauguin, and where society see you as a sophisticated person, and that's exactly what you are, but they see you as that, not that they see a sort of, what's the word, a tramp. In order for them to want to buy your art, they need to see someone with a respectable view of the world. But you can't even have that conversation if you smell and your clothes are ratty. Maybe you need to spend a bit more time on presentation, right? On your appearance, but then also on your social skills, you know. And in other words, in short, what's the difference, not in terms of your art, but in terms of personality between yourself and Gauguin? And the answer is, you lack confidence, you lack reputation, you lack social. Tell me, I'm going to put you on the ground. Yeah. In other words, what I'm trying to get at is there was a very important area that Van Gogh could and should have worked on, which is his people skills, his ability to be well liked, not because of his art, but because of his charisma, right? And I understand that, like, especially as a writer, I don't really want to have to sell my books or to promote my books. I want them to just sell themselves, right? But that's not very realistic. You do need to reach out, and you do need to express who you are, and not only have the confidence to do that, but also take it on the chin when people say, I don't give a shit who you are, or I don't like who you are, or wow, I thought you were a 70-year-old from India, whatever it is. You've got to put yourself up on that platform and have a couple of onions thrown at you, and then kind of adapt to that, and also figure out what it is you're going to say, right? But I don't know if I would say that Van Gogh did absolutely everything in his power and he couldn't have done anything more. I would have said you could have made more of an effort to get to know the people around you, and maybe, yeah. Do you know what I'm saying? On the other hand, yeah, market himself. In other words, be a bit more of a Stockton Rush, because he definitely wasn't a Stockton Rush. I do understand, because I'm a lot like that. I don't really want to do the PR thing. I want the work to do the talking. And I understand that he feels simultaneously probably shy and also inadequate, and also that's not who I am. I'm not the sort of artificial person that puffs himself up, right? But there's a sort of a point where you've got to say, well, if you're a real artist, right? If you really want to go into this area, you've got to take that self-belief that you have in your art, right? And you need to try and carry it into the people that you want to buy your stuff, because it's expecting a lot that you just put up a picture and someone goes, I don't know who painted this, but I'm going to buy the picture. In a real sense, they're not only buying the picture, they're buying you. And in another sense, they're not only buying you, they're buying the picture. It's kind of a package deal. And so that's what he needed to learn, is how to sell himself, right? How to sell himself, and not by writing letters, not by writing hundreds of letters to his brother. Go and speak to art dealers where you live. Go and speak to rich patrons where you live. Go and reach out to people where you live. Go and pick up your game where you live. Don't keep don't expect Theo to be doing all the hard work. You can also try and sell your own stuff. Yeah, but I'm talking about this idea that you promote your own work. I'm not really talking about, I'm just talking about that aspect. Okay, so let's go back to the letter. So he says, anyway, we must get our place in the sun without upsetting anyone. And I keep thinking that you haven't the place in the sun that you ought to have, because the Paris work at Goupil's is too exhausting. Then when I think of that, I get into a mercenary frenzy. Then I want to earn money so that you will be freer to go where you like and do what you like. I feel that we are getting near to selling or finding help, so that we shall be given a chance to breathe. I think that sentence says so much. It says, it feels like they're getting near to, I don't know if it's the finish line or the halfway mark, but it sort of feels like they're getting near, right? And he said it quite a few times, that things are getting hot or things are getting warm. But he feels like he's very close to whatever situation he needs to be in, right? So that we shall be given a chance to breathe. In other words, what does he mean by a chance to breathe? A chance to relax, a chance where I don't have to work so hard anymore, a chance where our efforts start kind of paying back, right? There I go, perhaps thinking that it is quite near and it may still be far off. And then I feel this dread of spending too much coming over me. However, the pictures come off better if one looks after oneself and keeps one's health. So this is another rare reference to the word dread. And, if you're thinking about words like despair and depression, dread comes very close to that. But you'll notice he doesn't really mention that word very often. It's a rare reference to this word dread. And he doesn't dwell on it. He doesn't say, I feel this dread and the dread is terrible and I can't handle the dread and it's dread, dread, dread. He does talk about anxieties there, but he doesn't kind of dwell on it. He says, but the pictures come off better if one looks after oneself. So you kind of get the idea that he manages his dread, that he's able to get over his anxiety, right?
Dread.
Dread, anticipate with great apprehension or fear.
dread,
Regard with awe or reverence. That's not what we're looking at. Fear, apprehension, trepidation, but that's really what we're looking at. Anxiety, right? And there he uses the word himself. He says, but as for you in your work and in the rest of your life as well, you must not have too many anxieties. How are those sciatica pains? Have they stopped? Now, he's not saying, I have anxieties. He's saying you shouldn't have too many anxieties. In any case, you'll help me more by staying well and living well than by being too straitened on my account, even if the consignment of pains is to suffer. Well, this is a long letter. I think the time will come when my work will be in demand, very good, but it may still be far off. There again is you getting his psychology from him in his own words. Was Van Gogh suicidal because he couldn't sell his art? No, he was very realistic about the fact that he couldn't sell his art, and he thought it might take quite a long time. I'm sure I'll sell it eventually, but I'm not going crazy because I can't sell my art right now. I'm not happy about it. It's the journey that I'm on. It's the Pilgrim's Progress. And he was right about it. A time would come when his work would be in demand. It may still be far off. It did end up being quite far off. And meanwhile, do not pinch yourself, because business as well as painting will come of itself and in a dream, as it were, quicker and better if you're taking care of yourself than if you're stinting. If only he listened to his own advice, right? And at our age, surely we ought to have a certain calm, a certain wisdom in managing our affairs. Again, if only he listened to his own advice. I'm afraid now of poverty, bad health, and all that. And I hope that you share these feelings. That is a very rational fear that he's got, especially bad health. Thanks, Zircon. I just want to get through this letter, then I'll go and get some water. So I almost feel remorse at having bought that piece of furniture today, although it is good, because I've had to ask you to send me money sooner than I should have otherwise. Get this quite clear. If you are ill or if you have too many difficulties or worries, nothing will go well. You notice how the tone of these letters has changed from the previous days, weeks, months of letters. It's suddenly things have gotten quite serious. Both brothers seem to be struggling with energy and with physical pain, with health as well. And if you are well, business will end by coming to you of itself. So you kind of get the idea that it's not only Van Gogh in all who is turning himself inside out, but his brother is also working hard in Paris to make things happen in all. You kind of get the idea that both brothers are, working really, really hard towards this project. So Magical Mother says, I'd love to know more about Theo and his thoughts on his brother. Well, I've got good news for you. Very soon we're about to read a very rare letter in this month that Theo sends to Vincent. So we will see that. What does he say? And if you are well, business will end by coming to you of itself, and ideas about your business will come to you infinitely more abundantly if you're eating well than if you are not eating enough. So say stop if I'm going too fast. If not, of course, so much the better, because I can certainly work much better when I'm comfortable than when I'm too hard up. But don't go and think that I care more for my work than of our well-being, right? That's our well-being. And that's again another reminder. When Van Gogh lost his ear and when Van Gogh was shot, Van Gogh isn't the individual that a lot of people think he is. It's not like I cut off my ear. It's a situation of Theo is I'm in this with Theo. Theo is part of this situation as well. How is this going to affect Theo one way or the other? And so he says, I don't care about my work more than I care about us. I care about your well-being as well. So what would happen if he got himself into a situation that could embarrass Theo? Well, if he took it upon himself in a way, maybe he felt it would not embarrass Theo. Anyway, he says, or at least, and for our peace of mind above all, Gauguin will feel the same thing one day and he will get all right again. Perhaps the time will come, perhaps the time will really come for him when he will want to be and will be able to become again what he really is, the father of a family. Now, that's another thing that is going to be quite a surprise, is when Gauguin pitches up in all. Bear in mind, this is a father, so a dad, a husband. That those are two things that Van Gogh aren't. Van Gogh's not a husband, never been one, and Van Gogh's not a dad either. Gauguin's both, and yet Van Gogh's also going to be looking at Gauguin like, so you married, right? And you a dad, and and you doing that and that and that, and you got a girlfriend, and this and that and the next thing. And so in a weird way, Van Gogh is on the far end of that extreme. You kind of have the situation where one man has gotten married, had kids, and is still kind of fraternizing with women. And on the other side, you've got this other guy who just works like hell and nothing more. And you can imagine Van Gogh kind of being simultaneously disgusted, but also, I don't know if tempted is the word, but also like, wow, almost like Chris Watts. Wow, it is possible to have a girlfriend or something like that. I mean, he's so caught up in work that is not, sorry to use a horrible comparison like that, but just that idea. I don't know if you remember, Chris Watts was like, wow, I didn't even know a woman like you existed. It's kind of that naivete where you kind of go, wow, I didn't really realize that you can have these experiences. That's what I'm kind of getting at. I remember when I was at university, can't quite remember the circumstances, but this one dude needed a place to stay. And anyway, I can't quite remember what was going on. I don't know if my father was in America or the Caribbean or something. But anyway, I ultimately invited him to come and stay with me. And it was when I was studying quantity surveying. And his girlfriend, and I think the reason why I invited him was I really liked his girlfriend. I was kind of quite fascinated with him because I sort of thought, so this is the kind of guy that she likes. And he had this, like a Seiko watch, and he sort of had this movie star thing about him. And I guess through this dude, I kind of got a bit of a glimpse what was possible in a particular sense, if that makes sense. I don't know if you've ever had that experience. You meet someone and they are having encounters that are very different to the ones you used to having, if you know what I mean. And I'm just saying, I sort of get the feeling Van Gogh had that sort of experience with Gauguin, which was both disturbing in a sense, but also fascinating, for the lack of a better word. Wow, Stephanie, good to see you here. Okay. Anyway, so he says, I'm very, very curious to know what he has done in Brittany. Bernard wrote praising it greatly, but it is so difficult to paint richly in cold and poverty. And perhaps his real home will prove to be the warmer, happier South as well. So he is talking about Gauguin, and it's quite true what he's saying. He's saying it's difficult to paint richly in cold and poverty, and his home would end up being in Tahiti, the warmer, happier South. If you saw the vines, there are bunches that actually weigh a kilogram. The grapes are magnificent this year because of the fine autumn days that came at the end of a summer that had left a lot to be desired. I'm sorry I spent money on that chest of drawers, but perhaps it will save us buying a more expensive one. The cheapest would have been 35 francs. And when Gauguin comes, he must have something to put his linen in, and altogether his room will be more complete with it. If ever for a moment we are rather flush, meaning, comfortable financially, I shall take this one for myself and get him the one for 35 francs. You can always find a bargain at that price, but not always at the price I paid for this one. I've been thinking that if you've got some studies of mine that are beginning to crowd your place a bit and get in your way, you could take them off the stretchers and send them down here where there's room enough to store them. I'm thinking of some of last year's stuff, or for that matter, anything that is inconveniencing you. Paris will be very beautiful in autumn all the same. So bear in mind, Van Gogh paints a picture and then he sends it to his brother in Paris, and eventually his brother's home is like paintings everywhere, paintings under the beds, paintings behind doors, paintings under the couches, paintings all over walls, but then paintings stacked one against the other. That's how they're starting to accumulate. He says, the town here is nothing. At night, everything is black. I think that plenty of gas, which is after all yellow and orange, heightens the blue, because at night the sky here looks to me, it's very odd, blacker than in Paris. And if I ever see Paris again, I shall try to paint some of the effects of gaslight on the boulevard. It's quite a fascinating portrait here, just in words, of the night and the lighting that he's used to. Bear in mind, it's gaslight. It literally is gaslight. I mean, talk about gaslighting today. Well, that's actual gaslight, light that is, they use sometimes whale oil, or I think it's sulfur. But anyway, yeah, he talks about the effects of gaslight. Oh, but in Marseille, it'll be the opposite. I imagine that it must be more beautiful than Paris, the Canebière. I do need a drink of water, but I'm almost at the end of this letter. I so often think of Monticelli, and when my mind dwells on the stories going around about his death, it seems to me that not only must you exclude the idea of his dying a drunkard in the sense of being besotted by drink, but you must also realize that here, as a matter of course, one spends one life in the open air and in cafes far more than in the north. My friend the postman, for instance, lives a great deal in cafes and is certainly more or less of a drinker, and has been so all of his life. Now, if you've seen the movie Loving Vincent, by the way, Stephanie, you have seen Loving Vincent, right? Stephanie L. Stephanie, I was just thinking, aren't you interested in making a movie about the murder of Vincent van Gogh? You're a producer. Don't you think that would be an interesting project? Anyway, he says, so in terms of Loving Vincent, you know, the plot of that story is the postman gives a letter to Theo, addressed to Theo, to his son, and then his son delivers it. Well, you can see that there's some truth in that whole situation, that his friend was the postman. and his postman liked drinking, and I guess he drank a little bit with the postman. Was well done. Stephanie, I don't know if you know that group, the producers who made that movie are now making another movie called The Peasants, based on a novel. Looks quite interesting. Anyway, but he is so much the reverse of a sot. His exaltation is so natural, so intelligent, and he argues with such sweep in the style of Garibaldi that I gladly reduce the legend of Monticelli, the drunkard on absinthe, to exactly the same proportions as my postman's. I've got to say, in terms of the true crime thing, the fact that he's talking about drunkard, absinthe, what does he say, drinker, it kind of makes you wonder whether he hasn't been drinking a little bit, because the how does that saying go? The lips overflow with what's going on in the heart and the mind, right? How does that saying go? What comes out of the mouth overflows from the heart. What the mouth speaks comes from the heart. Out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks out of the abundance of the heart. Yeah, that's basically what I'm looking for. And so the question is, these references to drunkard and drinking and absinthe, is this a sign that this is how he's dealing with the stress that he's under in the middle of October? It's a question. I don't know the answer. Why is he talking about drunkards and drinking and absinthe? Is that just random, or has he been having a couple of drinks? My paper is full. Write me as soon as you can with a handshake and good luck. Ever yours, Vincent. Some days I shall know some details of those last Monticelli. Okay. The next letter is the 10th of October. After that, 13th of October, 14th of October, 16. Wow, it's there's a kind of a long way I need to go still, looks like. So many letters in this month. Okay, so I'm going to read the 10th of October, but I'm just going to go and get a glass of water. Be back in a second. Whew, okay. Right, so let's continue. I did stub something. Right, let's continue. My dear Thea, this is 10 October. A letter from Gauguin paying me heaps of undeserved compliments and adding that he will not be coming till the end of the month and that he has been ill and dreads the journey. What can I do about it? But after all, when you come to think of it, it is such a devastating journey when the worst lung cases undertake it. So he's literally wanting to invite an ill guy into his home, right? And someone who seems to be kind of manipulative already, paying him a lot of, he says, undeserved compliments. When he comes, he will be welcome. If he does not come, well, it's his own lookout. But isn't it, or oughtn't it to be clear that he's coming here for the very purpose of getting better? And he asserts that he has to stay where he is to recover. The absurdity of it, really. Thanks for your, so already he's like, you know what he's saying doesn't really make any sense. He's saying he could come to the south and, in the warmer climate here and the sort of open air, he could recover his health. Thanks for your postal order for 20 francs. I put 35 francs for the dressing table and chest of drawers on my list of necessary purchases. Well, now I have bought one of 14 francs and paid for it, of course. Send me an order for those 14 francs, I beg you. I felt less hesitant about getting this piece of furniture because I want to be ready in case Gauguin should come sooner. I enclosed a copy of my answer to his rather too complimentary letter. Since he's not coming at once, I want all the more to try to have everything in good order and in readiness for him when he does come. What do you think this delay does to the stress aspect? Like, if you think about it in a certain sense, if Gauguin was supposed to be coming in the middle of the month, then you could say that was Vincent's deadline, and so he was working really hard towards the deadline of the middle of the month. But when he delays when he's coming, do you think that means that he gets stretched even more thin for a longer period? What do you think is the end result? Do you think him postponing it makes things worse or makes things better? So he says, since he's not coming at once, I want all the more to try to have everything in good order and in readiness for him when he does come. So even though he's coming late, he's still going to be working flat out to try and do even more and get even more things done, right? Including painting. He says, I've done a new size-aesthetic canvas and I expect to begin a new one this evening when the gas is lit. The one I've just done is another garden. These days, I always have the feeling that I'm spending money, but every day, too, it astonishes me to find how I get it back from the house. Truly, it does you good to come home, and it gives you new ideas for work. Gauguin writes very nicely, but all the same, he does not say why he's not coming at once. He says because he's ill, but wasn't he coming here to recover? I thought that was precisely what we had in mind. So you can see there's a little bit of a trust thing going on. There's a little bit of a sense of I don't really quite understand what's going on with him, right? I don't know if I believe his story. He says because he's ill, but wasn't he coming here? Right. Anyway, let them just do as they please. Ever yours, Vincent. And then here's his reply to Gauguin's letter. My dear Gauguin, thanks for your letter. Far too flattering to me. So you are not coming till the end of the month. Very good. Since you really think that you will not get more, what? Very good. Since you really think that you will get better more quickly in Brittany than here. I don't insist on it, only if your recovery is not very speedy in Brittany. Remember that we claim to be able to cure you more quickly here than there. Come, everything is always for the best in this best of worlds, in which we have, according to good old Pangloss anyway, the ineffable happiness of living. In this case, I've no doubt at all that everything will be for the best. So can you see Van Gogh's also putting on the charm here? And he kind of needed to do that. What he was doing with Gauguin was right and was good, but he kind of needed to be doing that, I think, more in general with the people around him. In this case, I've no doubt at all that everything will be for the best. It's not quite going to turn out that way, but it is absolutely true that the journey to Arles is as exhausting as you say. Sorry, is it absolutely true? Nonsense, since the worst lung cases make it. You well know that the PLM exists for that. Bear in mind, he's going to be taking a trip in a steam train, so there is going to be smoke. When I was a kid, I guess it shows just how old I am. When I was a kid, probably 12 years old or something, I did a trip by train in a I think it was a diesel locomotive, but nevertheless you had smoke coming out of the front of the train. And they told us not to look out the windows, and so of course I did look out the windows, and apparently the force of the smoke coming out of the chimney blew very fine filings off the chimney and into my eye. And so when we got to the station, when we got to Port Elizabeth, I was struggling to see out of my eyes. And when I was swimming, the chlorine was really affecting my eyes. And so I had to go and have eye surgery. And they were like literally sticking a needle into my eye to get these tiny little pieces of metal out of my eye. So that was my experience of that particular thing. Anyway, not fun. Or are you more seriously ill than you say? I'm afraid so. And if you can, either reassure me on this point or else write definitely that you are ill and in a bad way. But you write about business and talk about lithographs. This is what I think. For you, me, Bernard, and Laval to make lithographs at night is all right. I'm sure of that, but I'm not sure about their periodical publication, so long as I'm not better off. I've more than enough worry with the painting. There's always something to spend money on in lithography, even if you do not buy the stone. That would not cost so very much. I do not say that, but then for publishing, however modestly, the four of us would be in for at least 50 francs each and more besides. Contradict me if you like. I don't insist on it, but I still say what I say. I've already had some experience with one attempt, but the besides that I add means that it would not last and above all would never interest the public, and it would go on costing us money. I don't know if I agree with Van Gogh on this point. He's talking about lithographs. One way to make money in this time was through prints. And I mean, he was buying Japanese prints himself. So I'm not sure if I agree with him on this particular point. Lithography is a planographic printmaking process. So it's not just an ordinary print, it's a kind of it's that. There you have it. Anyway, it says, if it is at our expense and for our own pleasure and use, then I tell you again, I am for it. If you are thinking of someone else, I'm not for it. Do not tell me that one costs as little as the other if it's a question of publishing. Yours sincerely, Vincent, and do come as soon as you possibly can. P.S. to Gauguin, if you're not ill, do please come at once. If you are too ill, a wire and a letter, please. To Theo, perhaps you'll think that the P.S. to Gauguin to Kurt, but let him say whether or not he is ill, and anyhow, he will recover better here. Have you received my canvases? Okay, so now we go to the 13th of October. Tell me, have you ever seen this Van Gogh before? I think this is the first time I've ever seen it. You're right, you did. Okay, let's continue. 13th of October, my dear Theo, I did not quite dare to hope for your new money order for 50 francs so soon, and I thank you very much for it. I have a lot of expenses, and it worries me a good deal sometimes when I realize more and more that painting is a profession. So, check this out. I realize more and more that painting is a profession carried on most likely by exceedingly poor men, and it costs so much money. But the autumn still continues to be so beautiful. So can you see how, although he is to some extent weighed down by that realization, he's still very much inspired and enthusiastic. And that's the story of Van Gogh, that although he struggled, he was prepared to work. He was still prepared to work. But the autumn still continues to be so beautiful. It's a queer place, this native land of Tartarins. Yes, I am content with my lot. It isn't a superb, sublime country, this. It is only a Dumier come to life. There he says, I'm content with my lot. Have you reread the Tartarins yet? Be sure not to forget. Do you remember that wonderful page in Tartarin, the complaint of the old Tarascon diligence? Well, I've just painted that red and green vehicle in the courtyard of the inn. You will see it. It seems like that's a kind of wagon. And then he also talks about this picture. It's quite spectacular. I'm not sure if I'm crazy about these figures, but that's quite eye-catching. This hasty sketch gives you the composition, a simple foreground of grey sand background, very simple too. Pink and yellow walls with windows with green shutters and a corner of blue sky. The two carriages, very colourful, green and red, the wheels yellow, black, blue and orange. Again, a size study canvas. The carriages are painted like a Monticelli, thickly laid paint. You used to have a very fine Claude Monet showing four colored boats on a beach. Well, yeah, they are carriages, but the composition is in the same style. And then I must say, these are quite well-known Van Gogh paintings, the ones we're looking at right now. This one as well. Railway bridge at Quintaval, Avenue Montmayor. I think I've walked over that bridge when I was in Arles. I've certainly been to the Avenue Montmayor. Sketched by Vincent. Unless I'm thinking of another avenue. Talks about bright green lawn, a patch of garden, geraniums, lead orange in the background, black branches. Then he talks about the Trinquetail Bridge. And with all these steps is a canvas done on a grey morning. The stones, the asphalt, the pavements are grey, the sky pale blue, the figures coloured. And there's a sickly tree with yellow foliage. I've actually been right there, taken a photo of this particular spot. I wonder if I can find you guys the actual picture. I don't know if it's that hard to find. See if I can find it in a hurry. There it is. So yeah, that is that scene today, right? So I don't know if it's the same tree that's grown up over here, but there's the bridge there, the stairs, and probably you would want to stand a little bit more in the road to get the same angle that he had. But there's the bridge over there, right? That bridge there is that bridge there, and it's obviously at a bit more of an angle, and obviously the looks like kind of a glass covering or some kind of covering that's no longer there. But anyway, that is what he's referring to when he's doing that. Can you see he talks about a sickly tree, right? There's a sickly tree, and look at that tree today. It's not so sickly, is it? It's quite funny. So it's quite interesting following in Van Gogh's footsteps. Obviously, I stood right there where that was painted, and it's also just down the road from the Yellow House. What else does he say? Something about a sickly tree, and then forgive these very bad sketches. I'm half dead with painting that Tarascon diligence. So he just talks about how hard he's been working, and if you think about it, he has been working hard. He's produced that. He's produced that. And he's produced that. And he's produced that all pretty quickly in just a couple of days. You can see how hard he's working, and those aren't bad pictures. They're pretty good. Then he says, I'm just going to have dinner and I'll write you again this evening. But these decorations are getting on a bit, and I think they'll broaden my way of seeing and doing things. There will be 1,000 things to criticize in it, but that's all right, provided I can manage to get some verve into it. But here's to the country of good old Tartarin. I am enjoying myself in it more and more, and it is going to be our second fatherland. You can see still, despite the pressures, despite the exhaustion, he's still very inspired and positive and hopeful. Not that I forget Holland, the very contrasts make one think of it many a time. I will go on with this letter directly. I'm going on with it now. I so much wish I could show you the work that I'm doing. I'm really so tired that I can see my writing isn't much. I'll write better another time because the idea of this decoration is beginning to take shape. I wrote Gauguin again the day before yesterday to say once again that he would probably recover more quickly here, and he will do such beautiful things here. You kind of just wish if Gauguin had gotten there earlier, then Van Gogh maybe would have eased down on his efforts, right? maybe, maybe not. He says, I assure you, I believe that if ideas for my work come swarming over me now, and more clearly too, eating decent cooked food has a lot to do with it. And that is what everyone who paints ought to have. I tend to agree with that. You know, if you want to do proper work, you need to rest. You need to eat properly. What a lot of things that ought to be changed. Isn't it true that all painters ought to live like workmen? A carpenter or blacksmith is accustomed to producing infinitely more than they do, and in painting too, we should have large studios where each man would work with greater regularity. I'm really falling asleep and I can't see anymore. My eyes are so tired. So there again, you just get a confirmation. We're getting quite late into October now, and you're just getting confirmation that is really working himself to the bone. Is really tired. Is really is often exhausted. Right. Goodbye for the present, because I still have a lot to say and I must make you some better sketches. I shall probably make them tomorrow. Thank you again very much for your money order. A good handshake, ever yours, Vincent. And then he talks about 5 canvases I have in progress this week. That brings the number of these size 30 canvases for the decoration to 15. So these are all the pictures that has been working on. 14th of October. My dear Theo, a letter from Gauguin telling me that he has sent you some pictures and studies. I'd be very glad if you could find time to write me some details of what they are. With his letter was one from Bernard saying they had received the canvases I sent and that they are going to keep all 7. Bernard will send me another study in exchange, and the 3 others, Moray, Laval, and a young man, will also send me portraits, I hope. Gauguin is my portrait, and Bernard says he would like to have one like it, though he already has one of me, which I exchanged with him some time ago for the portrait of his grandmother. And I'm pleased to hear that they did not dislike what I've done in figure painting. So here's yet another confirmation that he's starting to become very worn down with the effort. You don't often hear him complaining like this, or even just bringing it up. He says, I have been and still am nearly half dead from the past week's work. I cannot do any more yet, and besides, there's a very violent mistral that raises clouds of dust which whiten the trees on the plain from top to bottom. So I'm forced to be quiet. So even though he's painting like a madman, even though he's forced to take breaks because of the wind, he's still half dead. I mean, that's how hard he's working. I have just slept 16 hours at a stretch, and it has restored me considerably. So can you see, we're just getting confirmation here of what is happening to him just before Gauguin arrives. And the answer is that he's working himself into a state of exhaustion. It's not a great way to segue into Gauguin's arrival. It is, right? Okay. And tomorrow I shall have recovered from this queer turn, but I've done a good night's work truly with 5 canvases. If that somewhat takes it out of me, well, it's natural. If I'd worked more quietly, you can easily see that the mistral would have caught me again. If it is fine here, you must take advantage of it. Otherwise, you would never do anything. Say, what is Surat doing? Am I pronouncing it right? If you see him, tell him from me that I'm working on a scheme of decoration which has now got to 15 square size 30 canvases, which will take at least 15 others to make whole. And that in this work on a larger scale, it is often the memory of his personality and of the visit we made to his studio to see his beautiful great canvases that encourages me in this task. I wish we had the self-portrait of Surat. How do you say it? Surrey. John, well, thanks for joining us. No, he's not famous at all at this point. I told Gauguin that if I urged him to make an exchange of portraits, it was because I thought that Bernard and he were sure to have made several studies of each other already. And since that was not so, and had done the portrait expressly for me, I did not want it as an exchange, as I thought it was too important for that. He wrote to say that he was determined and I should have it in exchange. His letter is again very complimentary. As I don't deserve it, we will say no more. So you kind of get the sense again that Gauguin is a bit of an opportunist, right? Even Van Gogh can tell that he's being buttered up, right? Seurat. Okay. I'm sending you an article on Provence, which seems well written to me. These Philibres are a literary and artistic society. Clovis Hughes, Mistral, and others who write fairly good, sometimes very good, sonnets in Provençal and sometimes in French. If the Philibres stop being unaware of my existence someday, so that I think that should help answer your question, John. Is he famous? No, most people are unaware of his existence. They will all come to the little house. I would rather this had not happened before I have finished my decorations. But since I love Provence as unreservedly as they do, I perhaps have a right to their attention. By the way, I was watching the Tour de France a couple of days ago, and they were riding in the area that the whole Magellan voyage started off in. It was really incredible. The area that they were cycling through is the area that the Magellan ship was built in so many years ago. Anyway, he says, and by the way, yeah, that was actually in Spain, in the north of Spain. The Tour de France in the north of Spain. He says, if I ever insist on that right, it will be so that my work may remain here or in Marseille, where, as you know, I should so much like to work, because I believe that the artists of Marseille would do well to continue what Monticelli began. If Gauguin and I were to write an article in one of the papers here, that would be enough to get in touch with them. A handshake, ever yours, Vincent. Okay, so I think this is going to be the last letter. Or shall we do two more? So 16 October, my dear Theo, at last I can send you a little sketch to give you at least an idea of the way work is shaping up. For today, I'm all right again. My eyes are still tired, but then I had a new idea in my head, and here's the sketch of it. Another size 30 canvas. This time, it's just simply my bedroom. Only here color is to do everything, and giving by its simplification a grander style to things is to be suggestive here of rest or of sleep in general. In a word, looking at the picture ought to rest the brain, or rather the imagination. Does he succeed? The walls are pale violet, the floor is of red tiles. Red tiles? The wood of the bed and chairs is the yellow of fresh butter, the sheets and pillows very light greenish citron. Remember, this will be the bed where he nearly bleeds to death, right? This is the bed where he, after he loses his ear, he goes and lies on this bed. and it's when they find him, it's, you know, it's this bed is soaked with his blood. And this is 2 months away. We're 2 months away from that happening. The window green, the toilet table orange, and the basin blue, the doors lilac. And that is all. There's nothing in this room with its closed shutters. The squareness of the furniture again must express inviolable rest. Portraits on the walls and a mirror and a towel and some clothes. The frame, as there's no white in the picture, will be white. This is by way of revenge for the enforced rest I was obliged to take. I shall work on it again all day, but you see how simple the conception is. The shadows and the cast shadows are suppressed. It is painted in free, flat tints, like the Japanese prints. It is going to be a contrast to, for instance, the Tarason Diligence. I think when he says that, he means Carriage and the Night Cafe. I'm not writing you a long letter because tomorrow, very early, I'm going to begin in the cool morning light so as to finish my canvas. How are the pains? Don't forget to tell me about them. I know that you will write one of these days. I will make you sketches of the other rooms too someday. It's pity I don't think he did, ultimately. I think he did a sketch of onions or something, but he didn't really do other rooms. With a good handshake, ever yours, Vincent. Quite a short letter, that one. I think this is going to be the last letter. Gorgan arrives like 5 days after this. So it's quite a good point. It does look like terracotta. Don't cry, Sharon. Okay. So this is a letter from Vincent to Gorgan. It has a Bernard number here because it appears in the addition of letters to Bernard as 22. My dear Gorgan, thanks for your letter, and above all, thanks for your promise to come here as early as the 20th. So right here, it's the 17th of October. So we are getting really close to this long-awaited arrival. Surely the reason you mentioned not feeling well will hardly contribute towards making your train journey a pleasure trip, and it is only right that you should put off your journey until you can manage it without trouble. But apart from that, I almost envy you your journey, which is going to show you miles and miles of landscapes in the splendor of autumn. There is still present to my mind the emotion by my own journey from Paris to Arles last winter. How I peered out to see whether it was like Japan yet. Childish, wasn't it? So can you see how, you know, for them, going by train somewhere is a big deal. It's a little bit like, but probably a bigger deal than, it's a bigger deal than flying long haul South Africa to New York. The point is, it is a big deal. It's expensive, and it's. Are you okay? It requires quite a sort of investment of, like a personal investment. It takes quite a lot of effort. There's still present in my mind the emotion, okay, of my own journey. Listen, the other day I wrote you that my eyesight was strangely tired. All right, I rested for 2.5 days, then set to work again, but without daring to go out into the open air yet. I have done, still for my decoration, a size steady canvas of my bedroom with the white deal furniture that you know. Well, I enormously enjoyed doing this interior of nothing at all, of a simplicity a la Surrey. Well, there it is. So there he does a little drawing in his letter of that room, with flat tints but brushed on roughly with a thick impasto, the walls pale lilac, the ground a faded broken red, the chairs and the bed chrome yellow, the pillows and the sheet a very pale green citron. Now you can imagine that he must be feeling quite excited that he's writing to another artist about the art that he's producing, almost like an equal. Bear in mind, Gauguin is a kind of a successful artist. He's gotten his foot in the door. He is selling his art, right? Vincent's talking to him almost like an equal. And obviously, he probably fancies himself not as an equal, but um, how can I put it? He fancies that he's um, kind of on an equal footing in the sense that I'm also an artist, not as good as you, but I'm also an artist. I don't know whether Gauguin would agree with that though. Gauguin would probably look at that and sneer and say, "You're not an artist. You're a wannabe. I mean, you want to be an artist. You're not quite an artist yet. I'm an artist." Anyway, he goes on to say, well, Jalsi says, "I wish he never met Gauguin." So he says, by means of all these very diverse tones, I've wanted to express an absolute restfulness. You see, and there's no white in it at all, except a little note produced by the mirror with its black frame in order to get the fourth pair of complementaries into it. Let's look at the white. She's talking about, I guess, that and a little bit over there. Take note of these chairs. He's going to be referring to these chairs in later pictures as well. Some of his most famous art, those chairs. Okay. Then he says, well, you will see it along with the other things, and we will talk about it. For I often don't know what I'm doing when I'm working, almost like a sleepwalker. So again, a reference to just how hard is working. It is beginning to turn cold, particularly on the days when the mistral blows. Can you see how the weather is starting to affect him? Can you see how the weather is starting to affect him? I've had gas laid on in the studio so that we shall have good light in the winter. Perhaps all will disappoint you if you come here in mistral weather, but you wait. It's only in the long run that the poetry of this place penetrates. And I must say that Gauguin has taken so long to leave that by the time he gets to Arles, it's sort of basically winter, which is quite sad. If it's winter in the north of France or winter in the south, it's winter. And it's kind of unfortunate that by the time Gauguin gets off his butt, by the time he arrives in Arles, autumn is pretty much on its last legs, and then it's winter, and there's not really much to paint then. So it's a little bit unfortunate that he did take so long to get a move on. You will not find the house as comfortable yet, as we shall gradually try to make it. You can see just how kind of self-deprecating Vincent is. He's sort of already making apologies for his really important guest. There are so many expenses and it can't be done all at once. But I believe after all that once you are here, you will be seized like me with a rage for painting the autumnal effects of in the intervals between the spells of the Mistral, that you will understand why I insisted on your coming here. now that we are having very fine weather. Well, we'll see each other. Ever yours, Vincent. It's quite an interesting statement there. You will understand why I insisted on your coming here. Actually, it's not going to be like that. Shortly after arriving, Gauguin's going to be like, I need to get out of here. I don't like it here. I don't like the people. I don't like you. Get me the hell out of here, right? Part of the reason is also he went to Arles because he didn't have any money. And shortly after he arrived in Arles, Theo sold his art. And so he was like, well, I don't have that problem anymore, so off I go. And so you can see he didn't have a strong sense of friendship towards Vincent. Okay. From Vincent to Theo, where's that other letter? Oh, so here it is. Letter from Theo to Vincent. Okay. So I'm going to read two more letters and then I'm going to finish up. My dear Theo, I'm overjoyed to hear what you tell me of your two new friends. But all the same, it amazes me that you tell me about them and their frame at, if memory serves me, 2,000 francs. Wow. And never a word of what was inside that frame, nor a single word of what they had done in the way of painting. Tell me, why are you looking at me? Perhaps it is because you think that I may have heard of them, but I declare it is the first time I've heard of this business, and even of the men themselves. So, being ignorant of things, I should like to ask, yes, so much for the frame, but what is there inside it, and what are they actually doing? After that, I shall certainly be able to get some idea of what their conversations with you and Pissarro were, once I have some notion of what they themselves are doing. In any case, it proves one thing, that the Dutch artists have spoken of you as the dealer in Impressionist pictures, and we must not lose sight of that. Then, what did they tell you of Dutch art, Breitner and Rappard and others? And lastly, what do they say about Tierstick? Gauguin writes that he has already sent off his trunk and promises to come about the 20th of this month, that is within a few days. I shall be very glad because I do believe that it will do both of us good. So write me some details about the new friends painting soon, and if they are really painters trying to make progress in virgin fields, boldly recommend the South to them. I believe that a new school of colorists will take root in the South. As I see more and more that those in the North rely on their ability with a brush and the so-called picturesque rather than on the desire to express something by color itself. That's obviously what he's trying to do, express something by color itself. Your news gave me great pleasure, but it so astonishes me not to know what there was inside that frame. Here, under strongest sun, I found what Pissarro said confirmed, and also what Gauguin wrote to me, the simplicity, the fading of the colors, the gravity of great sunlight effects. You never come near to suspecting it in the North, and if these artists of the monstrous frame really wish to see something new, let them go to Bing and then to the South. Myself, I already had palpitations over my order for pine wood frames at 5 francs. It is just what I said to Russell about his house, that this one here would cost several times less in hundreds than his will cost in thousands, and that after all, even without Russell, we were working for Gauguin. Well, this, I can see this is a really long letter. Money over there. Have they seen anything of Seurat, our gentleman of the frame? I think that as a creation, I should prefer Seurat's frame to theirs. By the way, speaking of Seurat, have you seen him again? As to selling, I say you are certainly right not to go out of your way looking for sales. I certainly should prefer never to sell if it could be. But all the same, if we were forced to it, certainly after what has gone before, we have no alternative. Yet even though we might be obliged to do it someday, we could not do better than take our time about it. A good handshake, and I hope you will tell me what there really was inside the frame. In regards to the new friends and my best wishes. If they want to see something new, certainly they could go south or to Africa or Sicily if it is winter. But if they have originality, it is only the real South that will show them anything different from Holland. Goodbye. I hope for only a little while and that you will write again soon. A good handshake. Ever yours, Vincent. And then, have you read Madame Chrysantheme yet? Theme yet? I'm adding a line to tell you that this afternoon I finished a canvas representing the bedroom. So that one. In any case, it pleased me mightily that you should have fallen in with these Dutchmen. It is really quite possible that I may have heard of this large picture, though not of the frame. He keeps going on about it, doesn't he? Some time ago, Rappard told me a story praising a picture and its painter, and I can easily tell if it's the same picture when you tell me what they are doing. That's the end of my water. However that may be, my dear boy, look here, if you complain of having nothing in your noodle in the way of producing good stuff, just imagine how very much more reason I have for feeling the same depression. It's quite interesting that he uses that word basically for the first time in a long time. And I'm not really sure if I'm not really sure if I've ever seen him use that word. I could not even do a stroke of work without you, and we must not go and get excited over what the two of us managed to produce, but just smoke our pipes in peace and not torment ourselves into melancholia because we are not productive separately and with less pain. Certainly, I have my own moments when I should dearly like to change and be in business for a bit, and by so doing, be able to earn some money myself. I don't know what he means exactly by that change. I'd ideally like to change. Does he think, is he talking about not being an artist? He seems to be saying there's some moments where I would just like to have a little bit of money, but I'd just like to be able to earn some money. Well, if he says I should dearly like to change and be in business, doesn't he mean he's not saying I would like a change, he's like saying I'd like to change. Isn't that an oblique reference to changing, not being an artist anymore, potentially? But since for the moment we can do nothing to change it, let's accept this fate. That you on your part are condemned always to do business without rest or change, and that I on my part also have a job without rest, wearing enough and exhausting to the brain. Both Van Goghs are very much in the same boat. I mean, so much so that they would die 6 months apart from each other. They were both working very hard, and there you have it, without rest. I, on my part, also have a job without rest, wearing enough and exhausting to the brain. I hope that within a year you will feel that between us we have produced a work of art. This bedroom is something like the still life of the Romans Parisiens with the yellow, pink, and green covers. Do you remember it? I don't know if that's the right one, but I think the workmanship is more virile and simple. No stippling, no hatching, nothing. Only flat colors in harmony. I do not know what I shall undertake next, for my eyes are still tired even yet. Oh, I must say my voice is getting tired. Oh, Timmy. Timmy. Yeah. Oh. Someone's getting far too relaxed. And then Timmy's looking at me like, are you mad? What did I do wrong? And in just such moments after hard work, and all the more the harder it is, I feel my own noodle empty too, you know. And if I let myself go, nothing would be easier than to detest what I've just done and kick my foot through it a few times, like old Cezanne. After all, why kick my foot through it? Let's leave the studies in peace, even if even if one sees no good in them. And if we see something that may be called good, well, so much the better. After all, don't let's meditate on good and bad too deeply. They're all relative. It's quite an interesting statement. That is exactly the fault of the Dutch, to call one thing absolutely good and another absolutely bad. Nothing in the world is as hard and fast as that. Ain't that the truth? By the way, I've read Rishipin's Césarine too. There are some very good things in it. That march on the retreating soldiers, how one feels their weariness, and without being soldiers, haven't we all marched like that sometime? The quarrel of the father and son is just heartbreaking, but it is like La Glue, also by Rishipin. I find that it leaves no hope, whereas Guy de Maupassant, who has written things certainly as sad, lets things end more humanely in the end. Look at Monsieur Parent. Look at Pierre et Jean. It does not end in happiness, but in the end, people are resigned and go on in spite of everything. Can you see how he's someone who is okay with struggle again? Sometimes stories don't end in happiness, but in the end, people are resigned and they go on in spite of everything. That is his attitude, and that again, that's not how the mainstream know Van Gogh, to their shame. I think that is what he's thinking. Yeah, I have read a lot today. Okay, it does not end in blood and horrors like the other things. Well, sorry, sorry for you, Vincent. This would end in blood and horrors. Indeed, I much prefer Guy de Maupassant because he's more comforting. At the moment, I've just finished Eugène Grande by Balzac, the story of a miserly peasant. Goodbye for now. Goodbye, I hope for only a little while. Ever yours, Vincent. And then a postscript. Come now, if we do not produce pictures with frames like these Dutchmen's, you and I are making pictures like Japanese prints, and let's be content with that. Okay. Last letter, 19th of October. This is from Theo to his brother. So remember, I was saying, let's hear Theo's voice for a change. How does Theo respond to some of these letters? Now, bear in mind, in order for this letter to survive, means Theo wrote it to Vincent, and Vincent must have kept it. And the reason Vincent kept it was because it was kind of momentous. Well, what was momentous about it? Well, Gauguin's arrival. And I guess another reason he may have kept it was because he needed to know the dates and times. What time must I pick Gauguin up at the station, right? And so maybe the letter had some kind of special meaning, both in terms of, well, I need to know what time, but also he'd been waiting for this for a long time, perhaps. 19 October 1888, my dear Vincent, it was really a rather serious omission on my part to have talked to you about De Haan and Isaacson without mentioning what they have done up to now. Above all, I wanted to give you an idea of the kind of fellows they are. I've not seen the large picture, but judging from a photograph taken, so in other words, he's talking about what is in this really expensive frame. But judging from a photograph taken of a preliminary sketch, I think it cannot be at all bad. The subject is Uriel Acosta before a tribunal. Wonder if we can see that picture. Apparently not. 11 o'clock at night, no wonder I'm definitely quite tired. It was a judicial crime in Jewish history. So this is actually a picture of a scene in a court, looks like. The composition is nothing like Rembrandt, as the light is not concentrated in one part of the picture, but for all that spread effectively all over it. Since the costumes belong to that epoch, it has been said that it is a bad imitation of Rembrandt. It is certain that he was influenced by the latter, but notwithstanding this, there is quite a personal quality in the work of his, which I have seen to be found in the way he spreads his light all over his picture or drawing. I can't help read this letter and try and imagine, like, where is Theo writing this letter? Is he at Goupil between customers? Is he at Goupil leaning over the counter writing a letter? Or is this at the end of the day in his own apartment by himself writing a letter? Or is it both? Bear in mind, every day he goes to the store and the artworks in the store, some of which he sells and some of which he doesn't sell. And so he's obviously also contemplating what's going on in the art world, what's going on with photography, what's going on with my brother, what should my brother be doing? He says, I'm sending you 2 photographs of drawings so that you'll be able to judge for yourself. The photographs have turned out rather badly, for the drawings are a bit dim. They look upon Breitner as one of the most vigorous of the modern Dutchmen. I don't think they place him above J. Morris, but they certainly place him above Israel's. I believe that if you knew them, you would share my opinion that there's no reason to distrust them. I haven't seen anything of Isaacson's yet except his sketches, which are done very well and highly original. He's waiting for drawings which are to be sent back from London. Sure isn't back in town yet, and I don't know what he's doing. He is very vigorous, that fellow, and I quite agree with you that his frames calculated to suit the picture are worth more than all kinds of expensive frames. A short while ago, I read Tartarin of Tarascon, which I think fine, and his Nabob, which I like much less. I'm also going to read the other Tartarin. They don't have Madame Chrysanthemum in the library, but someone promised to let me have it so that I may read it. I'm quite eager to know it. It is very annoying that you have been having trouble with your eyes. What can be the cause of that? So you kind of get a sense that Theo is a sensitive brother, that he doesn't just receive his brother's letters and look for the part that says send me so much money, and he sends it, and he doesn't otherwise care. He does read his brother's letters with interest. And then he says, what can be the cause of that? Excuse me, sorry. What do you think is the cause of the trouble with his eyes? Well, he's not sleeping, right? And it may also be hay fever. It may also be the change of seasons. Surah. So Gorgan is going to join you. It'll mean a great change in your life. Well, isn't that the understatement of the year? Surah. Thanks, Chelsea. so this is going to lead to a huge fundamental change in his life, and for the worse, right? He says, I hope that your project of turning the house into a refuge will be successful. I'll stop now, for otherwise the letter will not go off tonight. Cordially yours, Theo. And it is a fairly short letter. I mean, if there's one difference between Vincent's letters and Theo's, it's Vincent's tend to be longer, I guess. So we're going to leave it here. The next letter is from Vincent to Theo, 21st of October. And then the very next day, Gauguin arrives, right? And this is the picture he sketches just prior to that, this particular picture. Anyway, we will continue our story somewhere around Wednesday. So a little bit later. Stephanie, I don't know if you were listening to the earlier part of the episode. I mean, I think syphilis could have it could certainly be due to that, but you kind of get the idea that he was really exhausted. You know, he wasn't eating, he wasn't sleeping, and he was very, very tired, and he was also painting a lot. So I guess it could be all sorts of things. Magical Mother says, happy to have been here with everyone today. Yeah, that's also true. It's also true. My great grandfather got lung cancer, and it's, I think the question between, was it from the oil paints, was it from smoking a pipe, or was it both? It's quite hard to tell. But a lot of artists did struggle with, they had lead in the paint, and then that literally was toxic. That definitely was a factor. Yeah, that is my thinking, but I suppose it could be lots of different things. Okay, well, I'm quite tired myself. My dog seems to be berating me for being up this late. I am up a little bit beyond both our bedtimes. It could be a combination. So I think you are getting a sense that by the time Gauguin arrives in Hull, Vincent is already very worn out. And then what's going to happen subsequent to that? Well, we'll find out in the next episode. So episode 66, we'll deal with the letter from the 21st of October, which is the day before Gauguin arrives. And from now on, the letters are going to be shorter, less frequent, and obviously every letter is going to start including drama. Sometimes positive drama and sometimes negative drama. We are now literally just 2 months away from the ear incident. So we've sort of come to the end of Van Gogh's sort of normal life. Like after Gauguin arrives, his life is never going to be the same again. He will have a little bit of happiness, like a sense of coming alive again in the summer of 1890, but essentially from this point until probably April, May 1890, he kind of goes down into a very dark place, and your heart's really got to go out to him, because he didn't see this coming. I mean, who would see this coming? Thanks a lot. I appreciate it. Thank you. Snow Lion, our thoughts are with you, and I hope you have a good week, and let us know what the results are. If I can give you any any advice, try to stay away from sugar. You know, those nasty little organisms like sugar. So if you strip that out of your diet, that's one thing you can do. If you feel like you want to do something, that's something you can maybe do. Stephanie says, I don't want to miss the next episode. It's a pleasure, Stephanie. Absolutely right. The sadness is about to start. Okay, guys, thanks a lot for joining me. I hope you enjoy the rest of your Sunday. Thanks a lot for the super chats. Great once again to have both Stephanies with us, and the rest of you guys. Thanks a lot for being here. Okay, so I'm going to try and keep warm on the coldest night of the year. Now it doesn't look very cold, but it actually is cold. I've got my air cons on warm, very warm. But yeah, so I'm actually glad it's the coldest night, because after the coldest weather, it's going to warm up. So otherwise, it's always in front of you. So yeah. Okay, so thanks a lot. I think we've gotten through a lot of letters. From now on, we don't really need to go through that many, because there aren't really that many, and the time starts shooting forward. So from here on out, the pace is going to slow down a bit. Okay, thanks, guys. Oh, you never eat sugar. It's good to hear. Well, Mickey, you've kept a low profile, but really appreciate it. Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, guys. See you guys on Wednesday around about the same time. Ciao.